Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to the No Like Trust podcast. I'm Christine George.
And I'm Carrie Edwards.
Woohoo! We have the other half of Post and Beam in the house. Carrie is with us today. All right, Carrie, just let's kick it off. What brings you on to the No Like Trust podcast today, which I'm pumped you're here.
Well, if you're following Post and Beam at all, or you have seen any of our recent social media posts or gotten our emails, you know that this week and today in particular, we're talking all about branding specifically for real estate professionals. So that's what we're going to talk about today, right?
Yes. So how to build a recognizable and memorable brand, how to build trust. There's one main ingredient, and that is going to run like through our entire presentation today, and that is consistency. We're talking about consistency, and consistency is like with anything, right? It's like exercise, eating well, maintaining relationships, friendships. You need consistency in everything that you do, and it's no different with your brand. So we're going to talk all about that today. We have a number of strategies we're going to share, and that webinar actually goes live at 1:00. So we will put, if you're, at 1:00 our time. So we'll put that in the notes in case anybody's here and wants to register. And if you're listening to the replay or the podcast, we'll definitely put the link in there so you can catch the replay as well. Okay. So before we actually get into it, I have one question that I get all the time is, what is the difference between branding, marketing, and design? Because at Post and Beam, we are a marketing and design services firm. So what's the difference between branding, marketing, and design?
Ooh, a lot of times they get thrown into the same bucket, right? You hear them and think that they're interchangeable. And another couple of words that are often interchangeable are branding and logo, your brand and your logo. And those are different too. Yeah. So branding overall is an overall, it's the umbrella for every way that you put yourself out there in the world. And it's not just how you put yourself out there visually with things like colors, fonts, and logos. Like that's usually what people think of when they think of branding. It's your tone of voice, it's your messaging, it's everything. Marketing is the really what you say. Marketing is the message in how you put yourself out there, right? And then design is how those things are created. Design is like the tool. It's not, it's not for the everyone. It's the tool that you use to communicate. That's how I would say.
So all right. So branding is sort of the feeling. It's sort of the overall emotion of what defines you, your company, your brand. We're going to talk about this quote from Jeff Bezos. That is, your brand is what people say about you when you leave the room, which like, for me, it like hits right here, because at the end of the day, don't you want people to be saying great things about you when you walk out of the room, right? Especially if you're a real estate agent.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the marketing is how you execute it. Sorry, go ahead.
I think your marketing is how you execute it, and it's your messaging too. Your marketing is the tactics that you use to put to communicate your brand, right? So I think of marketing as your emails and your mailings and your signage and your the things that where you're telling a story and you're saying your messaging. That to me is more your marketing. Just to touch back on the reason why I think that the word brand and logo sort of get interchanged a lot. If you think about the original, I don't know if it's the original, but the origins of the word brand, it really does go back to branding cattle, where, farmers, cattle owners would take that hot, steamy iron and put their mark on the hind of their animal. And so that's kind of where your logo, the idea of your logo and brand comes into play. But in today's day and age, obviously, brand means so much more. It's one of those words that's evolved. But that's the origin of the word brand. And I think that that's why people think, brand, logo, same thing.
That's so interesting. I don't think I knew that. It's a little creepy to think about, but
It is a
yeah,
little
I mean, it
creepy.
makes total sense. Yeah.
It is a little creepy, but that's, I mean, if you look up brand in the dictionary, that's one of the definitions, and that's probably one of the originals.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Okay. So it used to be a physical stamp. Now it's really an emotional connection. So it's an emotional connection
That's
that you
perfect.
have with a product or service. Okay. So why is it important?
Oh my gosh, there's so many reasons why it's important. Your brand is how people know you, and it's how people remember you. And not to plug the title of this podcast, but it is how people know, like, and trust you, right? They know your brand because they remember your brand. And once they remember it and see it often, then they start to like it and trust it and create a connection. Your brand is how you create a connection between who you are and who your potential customer or your audience is.
Okay. All right. Okay. So if I'm thinking about myself as a real estate agent and I go to a cocktail party, let's say it's a neighborhood block party, and I'm, introducing myself to people as a real estate professional, because I actually don't have, oodles of money like Nike or Starbucks, and people aren't seeing me out there every single day, all the time. The branding in that moment is how people perceive me. It's the language I use. It's my body language. It's the visual cues that people see. It's my tone of voice. And then it's the feeling that I leave them with at the end of the party.
Absolutely. Okay. If you have a great sense of humor, you don't want to bottle that up and hide it. That's part of your brand, because that's you being true to yourself and who you are. So that's you want to stay true to who you are, so that you do leave that brand, that impression behind.
Impression. Yeah. That's really important. Okay. It's important because at the end of the day, you want to leave that cocktail party and have people want to call you when they need,
absolutely.
Real estate services.
That's why you want that impression to be kind of solidified into your visual brand. That's why we call your logo your visual brand, because you are probably going to hand out your business card, or, you may send somebody to your website. And what you want is for the impression that you left behind to be carried through into how you present yourself visually with any of your materials that represent your brand in a more physical way.
Okay. So how does that happen? Like you are a designer by trade. You are the design aspect of our company. You have years and years and years of experience working with big brands. How do you take what the perceived impression is of a brand, a person or company, and translate that visually?
So it definitely, I have to get to know the person or the brand or the company or the mission, right? So it depends on where we're starting. If you're working with a nonprofit, it's often you have to get to know the mission. If it's an individual, you have to get to know the person. You have to know their likes, their desires, their passions, their mission, even if it's an individual, their niche. You need to know who they want to speak to. It's not just about who you are, but it's about who you want to speak to, because you want to appeal to that audience, right? So obviously, this at Post and Bream, we work together as a team, and your discovery questions that you ask in the early stages of getting to know our clients are critical for me to take that information and kind of let it swirl around in my head and hear, I like, like Betty Russo is a great example. Oh, she loves purple and red and purple and black, and she wanted to incorporate that with her Keller Williams brand. So we worked on that and we made it come to life. And we went through a lot of stages to get there, but in the end, it really encompasses who Betty is, and she can hand out her business cards and feel really confident that it shows who she is.
So that's a great example, Betty. And actually, I think it would be worthwhile to talk about Betty and Diane Terry, who are two of our clients who we worked on at the very same time, yes, and are complete polar opposites in terms of their visual brand. Can you speak a little bit to sort of how you got to Betty versus how you got to Diane? And actually we'll give you their websites too. So you guys can actually, anybody's listening can actually see the difference. I mean, it's pretty, like opposite ends of the spectrum.
I was joking with Betty once that when I was telling her that I was simultaneously working on Diane Terry's work, when I was working on hers, is that the only thing they both had in common is that their names both have 5 letters in their first name and their last name. And that was where it ended. And really the way we worked on them, the way it was different is that their personalities are completely different. And it was that getting to know them. We spent a lot of time talking to them. Obviously, we knew Betty, although I didn't know Betty as well as you knew Betty coming into the whole process. But you sort of tease out like their likes and their dislikes. And, Betty was like, I love purple. And so then we showed her 3 different kinds of ways that 3 different purple palettes that integrated with the Keller Williams brand. That was really important because there's a bajillion different shades of purple. We all know that, right? And we needed to narrow her focus and find the one that really said Betty Russo, and the one that, spoke to her brand and how she wanted to present herself. And then on the flip side, Diane came to us and said, I want everything to be black and white. And that was the first thing she said. I want everything to be black and white. I don't want any color. And as a designer, I was like, okay. And then as we teased out with Diane, it wasn't that she wanted everything to be black and white. She wanted everything to be subtle and neutral. So we actually do have color. And sometimes people think that the neutrals, like the ones that we put on our walls, like behind me, it's vanilla milkshake in Ben Moore. That has color in it. Even though it's white, it still has color. And that's why it's important to work with a designer, I think, because it's how we think. We see the nuances. Like my son, my 11-year-old the other day said, what is the difference between cool gray and warm gray? And I had to kind of go into this explanation, like, well, cool gray has a little bit more blue in it and warm gray has a little bit more yellow in it. And gray is not gray. And he was like, I never thought about that. And I was like, and if you put them side by side, the reason why they're called cool and warm is because they actually feel cooler.
And there's the feeling piece of it.
There's the feeling piece of it. And how do you want, you want to be gray. And even Diane, I want everything to be black and white. Well, do you want it to be a stark black or do you want it to be a soft black? Because those feel very different. One's a little bit more approachable. One is more charcoal. One is more organic feeling. And one is more rigid and techie feeling. And there's a lot of theory that goes behind color. So working on the 2 of them simultaneously, I felt like my brain was flipping side to side to side, but it was good for me because it's always good to step away from something and to come back at it with a fresh thought, fresh thinking.
Yeah. That was so interesting that you explained it really beautifully. And it was really interesting to watch you, your thought process around both of those people. And I mean, when you talked about like specifically with Betty, bringing those 3 different shades of purple, for those of you who've not been through the process, what Carrie does is she puts together vision boards, and each of those 3 vision boards that she presented to Betty not only had different shades of purple, but different vibes that sort of evoked very different feelings. And it's just fascinating because the subtleties of each, like if you just saw one without the other 2, you would have thought that's purple. But when you saw the images and the shades and the typography that went with each of those 3 vision boards, you definitely we all had a preference of one over another one because of the feeling that it evoked. I think it's a fascinating process.
One was a glamorous purple and it had like more of a jewel tone feel. And one was luxurious and more royal, a deeper purple. And then one was a little bit more of a pop, a little bit more of a fun, like eye-opening purple.
Yes.
And even Betty herself was like, in our meeting when we presented them, was like, I like number 3. And then she was like, no, maybe I like number 1. And then came back to us the next day, which this is important. We always tell our clients to sleep on it, to not make a knee-jerk decision. She came back to us the next day or 2 days later and said, I actually really love number 2. And that was the one that I loved also. So I was kind of happy, but I never present work that I don't love, because inevitably they're going to choose, well, hopefully they're going to choose one of them. Right. And inevitably, if you present work you don't like, that's the one your client's going to choose. So I always make sure I like everything I present, and not just I hate to say it like that, something that I know is right. I never want to present work just to present a third option. If there's not a great third option, I'm probably only going to present 2. But I think with Diane, we presented 4 vision boards, because I really, I wanted to show her as many options as possible. And I really couldn't narrow it down, because I probably had, 10 that I narrowed down to 4. And then I was like, okay, I really need to know where she lands in this spectrum. And then we went from there, and she chose one and we moved forward with it. So
I think it was really important to show her, all 4 spectrum, because as you said before, like, black just isn't black. And she was very clear that she wanted black and white. But when you were able to show her various palettes of black, white, gray, some warm tones, some natural tones, sort of sprinkled in there, it really gave her something to think about. And so that kind of goes back to my original question, which is, how do you actually translate that? And one of the biggest ways I think that I've seen you do it is to provide numerous examples of, how that might come to life based on the discovery. So it's a fascinating process, and it's so fun.
Yeah. And people come to you knowing that they have a really solid idea, or they think they have a solid idea of what they want, but not everybody has. It's hard to step outside of your own brand too. And look at it. Like, it's hard to do your own thing. That's why you hire somebody else to do it. That's why it's terrible for designers. We agonize over designing our own brands, because we're doing it ourselves. So we don't have somebody else to step outside. But so our clients come to us very often with, I want this. And it's like, okay, but you need to push them a little bit. You need to expand that vision. And the vision boards that we create do that. They show them a broader spectrum, and then we narrow it down from there.
Yeah. So awesome. Okay. So let's go back to good branding. What from your perspective are the most important elements of good branding?
Well, I mean, we're going to talk about this today in our webinar. I think one of the most important things, you could have the ugliest, most horrible logo or whatever, but if you use it consistently, you will be remembered.
So consistency.
It's the consistency that I think is probably the most important thing. A good example is, if you grew up in Southern New Hampshire or Massachusetts in the 80s, like I did, there was a weather guy on, I think it was Channel 50. And his name was Al Capralian. And he started his weather report every night with this horrible, annoying good evening. But that was his brand. And I'm 47 years old, and 40 years after Al Capralian started I still remember his name and how he started his broadcast. And that's branding. He was consistent with it. If he didn't start, people would say, where's his horrible good evening? Yeah. So being consistent with your messaging and your tone, your colors, your fonts, and all of that, that's the most important thing. Everything else will fall by the wayside.
Give me an example of a strong brand in your mind and tell me why it's strong.
I mean, Target. Target's one of my prime examples of a strong brand. They use only red. I mean, maybe sometimes red and white, obviously, but like red and white, their icon is a Target. It is the name of their brand. And they're consistent. They're unwavering. They don't add a bunch to their branding. You see it and you know it's Target. I think they're one of the smartest, most buttoned up brands out there.
Awesome. what, in our industry, what are some of the biggest challenges you see? So in the real estate space,
So
where to start?
there's so many. I mean, with real estate agents, what was the data that we just pulled? There's 1.6 million registered members of NAR. So
Yeah.
are you competing against 1.6 million agents? No, because you're working in your market. But we know that if there's 1.6 million in the United States, there's a lot of real estate agents in your market. So you're competing with a lot of people and you're always trying to stand out. And the other thing is sometimes you're competing with people within your same brokerage. Every real estate agent is an entrepreneur. So you can't always bank on your franchise because it has to be you. So the thing I think that agents struggle with the most is trying to stand out and be different. But a lot of times what we see them do is pile more and more on to trying to say so much. Yeah. And they're also looking at what somebody's doing over there. And so then they're taking what somebody else is doing and not being true to themselves. So I think that over messaging and also trying to mimic what other people are doing and diluting who they are in the process.
Yes. Oh my God. I don't think you could have said it better. I mean, they're trying to stand out. They think they'll just continue to do more. I'll put a few more shamrocks on this, some hearts on that, like I'm gonna put a, sunflower today. What the heck, Google does it. And and I really like what she's doing and what she's doing and what they're doing. And, we're salespeople, by nature. And so and given our, where we are in terms of technology and stuff, we don't have any attention span. So we're constantly, shooting from the hip, I think.
I think another thing is that Canva has done real estate agents a great service and a great disservice at the same time. Because Canva allows, and this is people in general, it's not just real estate agents, but I think agents really fall into this trap where Canva is great. You can do a lot on your own. And I'm not dissing Canva. We use Canva. However, Canva has so many choices. And if you're constantly using a different Canva template or different imagery on Canva, because it's like eye candy, it's like you almost can't resist.
Yeah.
So you want to just it's so cool. Oh, maybe today I'll use this Canva template. Every time you do that, you're diluting your brand. It's so hard. You think you're being boring by sticking with the same iconography and the same kind of imagery and colors. It's not boring. It's consistent. And it actually makes you more memorable than when you're going all over the place.
Oh my God. So helpful. Super, super important. Okay. So who in our industry do you think does a good job and why?
Who in our industry means specific agents?
Agents, brokerages.
Okay. I absolutely love how Pam Blair of Yoga Bug Real Estate does her marketing. Pam is consistent with her typography. She's consistent with her logo. She's consistent with her messaging. She's consistent in so many ways. She's consistent with her social media like no other agent. I mean, we follow a ton of agents in our social account, right? And when I see Pam out for a hike and she's pointing up, she's talking about her market report. I don't even need to see the captions or turn on the sound. I know that's how Pam delivers her market report. It's like Al Caprile and the way he introduces his weather report. That's how Pam does her market report. And it's so consistent and so memorable. And she embraces the basic principles of her lifestyle and focuses on them. So Pam talks about her dogs. She talks about her yoga practice. She talks about her RV and she talks about the outdoors. That's Pam.
Yeah. And sometimes she doesn't even talk about it. She just is in the environment.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And so you don't even, it's kind of almost like sometimes you say like, you don't have to have your logo everywhere. Right. Just be within your color scheme or just be within your environment or, be within your, like Linda Okaneski is like the redhead. That's not something that she can even change, but like she's known as the redhead because she has red hair. It's like your signature, whatever it is, that's all part of your brand.
Embrace your brand. And, Barb Betts with her wigs, when you see her talking about her wigs, that's Barb Betts. And Barb is really good with color in terms of she uses pink a lot and she wears it a lot. It's not just how she shows her logo. It's like you said, you don't always have to show your logo, but she wears her brand colors. And today I have on our brand colors. So it's important to kind of even use nuances to reinforce your brand.
Your brand. Yeah. So important. Okay. We are at almost at the half-hour mark. We like to keep this to 30 minutes. I have one more question and then just some wrap-up stuff. So in our webinar that's happening after this, we are going to share 8 strategies. Can you give a sneak peek into like maybe one of those strategies?
Ooh, I'm trying to think of the best one. Okay. I think that one of the strategies that we're going to share that really can't be talked through is the use of typography and fonts, because there are so many bajillion different fonts, and it's really tricky to know how to use them, how many to use, where to use the right kinds for the right information that you're trying to get across. And we're going to show an example and really talk more in depth about why certain fonts work in certain places and others don't.
Ah, beautiful. I love it. Okay. As we wrap up, what are the 3 most important things you think our community should know today about branding?
Be consistent in every possible way. If you feel like you're getting in over your head, get help. Anything that's out of your depth or frustrates you is not worth your time when you can hire somebody to do it for you, right? And oh gosh, the third one, that's tough. Be consistent, get help. I don't know. I can't think of a third one.
I think it's, based on everything you said, I think it's really, oh my God, I can't even total.
Well, I just have one that popped into my head. Be true to yourself.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Be true to who you are. So don't try to come up with an image that isn't you. So I guess that's probably the most important thing.
Yes. Awesome. All right, Carrie, finish the sentence. Know, like, trust is
how brands and people are remembered and recognized.
How brands and people are remembered and recognized. Love it. Oh my God.
Yep.
So fun.
Yeah.
I love spending the know, like, trust time with you. This is so fun.
We talk all the time, but it's a little different when you're asking me these questions about like what I actually do. So
I know. I love it. Okay. So for everybody who is watching, thank you so much for being here. If you're listening on the podcast or watching the replay, thank you so much. If you love what we're doing, share with a friend. Leave us a 5-star review and, click that subscribe button, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Take care.
Bye.